From her roots in Rajasthan to becoming a global voice, she has redefined the journalism in a very great way. There are many more words we can say about you, ma'am, but everything is just speechless. So as I go on, from her roots in Rajasthan to becoming a global voice, she has used her incisive analysis and unwavering integrity to shape the future of Indian journalism. So let us all welcome with a huge round of applause, Miss Palki Sharma.
Hi, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. And thank you, Dhiren, for the introduction. And it's very good to be here. And you kept saying lunch, so it's also hard to meet the energy of the previous performance, but we'll try.
I want to dive right in. You somehow have this magical ability to take a very nuanced, complex conflict that's happening somewhere or something that's happening in the markets abroad that's affecting India and the entire world, and then simplify it down to 3 sentences for all of us to find palatable on YouTube and on our television screens. How do you find that level of clarity to translate the complicated to the simple?
I'm sure all the teachers here would relate to me when I say this. This is what we learn in school, and when I tell my stories, I'm thinking of my children and other children like them. And if I were to tell them about India's GDP growth, for instance, which is something that we talked about yesterday or the day before, you have to really break it down and tell it like a story, because enough and more research has shown that you remember things when they're told as a story as against things which are presented to you as part of a list. So that is the endeavor, to keep it simple, to keep the sentences short, and to break down complex ideas as much as possible.
As someone who tells stories for a living from a very different perspective to what you do, how do you keep yourself out of the story? Because it is your perception, your understanding of the story, and how you are presenting it to the audience. But you do it in a very unbiased way with both perspectives, with a great amount of clarity. You are one of those voices that we as a nation rely upon for our news, and for that we're eternally grateful to you. But how do you strive to maintain that clarity, that little bit of distance about something that affects all of our lives, including yours?
Actually, I do not really distance myself from the stories. I tell the stories that I feel passionately about. I try to tell both sides, but I also almost always tell what I think about it. I do a very editorial show. The only difference you could say is that I've given the viewer everything, that this is what one side is saying, this is what the critics are saying, and this is what we think it is. And then you use your judgment and decide where you want to stand on the subject. But I think it's not possible to, I know everyone likes to say that we're unbiased and neutral. I'm not neutral. I almost always take a side, because in some of the stories, for instance, what's happened in the Kolkata Medical College, it's not possible to be unbiased. You have to passionately feel that this is wrong and this needs to be fixed. And that is where the authenticity and passion in your work is going to come from, when you feel that this is something that must be addressed or raised. So to that extent, yes, we take sides, but we present what every side is saying to
a balanced view along with what you feel passionately about. So then, since you brought up Kolkata, let's talk about how do the girls, if I can get you to talk to the women in the audience here, the young girls, they're in the age group of 9 to 12, the 9th to 12th grade, pardon me, and they read about something like that in the news. They get a phone call from home. Do you have any words of advice to them about being a young woman in today's world?
The lack of safety is an unfortunate reality of our society, and we cannot wish it away. We'll have to work towards it. I've been a professional for more than 20 years. I've been away from home. Even today, no matter which part of the world I'm in, when I'm back home, I have to drop a message to my mother. That is touching, because you know that someone's always trying to ensure that you're safe. But at the same time, it's disturbing, because that's not how it should be. It's important to understand that this is our reality. What can we do about it? I think it stems from, among the many other things, the power imbalance in our society. This is a manifestation of power that a group or a gender feels that it can wield on another. So what can women do? What can you and I do? What can all the women watching here, all the girls in class 9, 10, 11, 12 do. Try to stay the course. Try to be good at whatever you're doing, and don't drop out of the workforce. We need more women leaders in every sphere of life so that they end up at decision-making tables and they take decisions and formulate policies that are women-centric too. That is not to say exclude men, but sometimes it doesn't occur to people. I don't know how many of you have read the book by Sheryl Sandberg called Lean In, where she said that as a senior leader, when she was pregnant, she walked up to the company bosses and said that we need a separate parking for pregnant women. And the bosses said, yes, it never occurred to them, obviously, because they were never pregnant. So you need women up there at decision-making tables to say, this is what we need to do, and that is how we'll bring change. So no matter what stream you pick, don't leave midway.
And I think it's important for all of these young women and these young boys to find their voice, to find their agency. I know in your career, you were a news presenter for quite a while and you're doing really well for yourself. And then you took a decision to step away and then come back again. How do you make a decision like that when you're doing well in your career? Can you take us through the thought process so we can understand why you would do something like that and then the comeback?
So I've spoken about this before. I did not set out to be a journalist. I was chosen by journalism. I liked it. I stayed. And many years into the job, I actually got a promotion and I started doing the 9 p.m. debate. And that is when I realized that this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. To be sitting in the studio like a buzzer, you can speak, you cannot speak. And it was basically a shouting match, and I was not enjoying it at all. So I thought I'll go back to doing something that I really wanted to do, which is making sarees. It was mostly an emotional decision, but it also stemmed from the fact that, I always read a lot about purpose, what is the meaning of what you're doing. It may sound too philosophical and not very practical to some, but to me it's very important that you enjoy what you do, because in my line of work, you don't have weekends, you don't have a lot of money for sure. What you have is the satisfaction of telling a story well and doing a job well and tracking something that you set out to do. And if you don't get even that, then you should rethink what you're doing. So that was my thinking at that point, that I'll go and build something else, but I don't want to be sitting here every day, 5 days a week, telling people, now you can talk and now you need to shut up.
But was it daunting at all, leaving 9 p.m., a prime time slot that pretty much every other journalist dreams of and aspires of getting, and to then make an entire shift towards like making sarees, and you rock them fabulously all the time.
I couldn't
They
sell
look
them,
amazing. But was that scary at all? Did you ever have a moment where you paused and wonder, am I doing the right thing? Then what do you do in a moment like that?
So a lot of my friends and my colleagues said that it was stupid, the ones who could tell me that to my face, that it's not you've worked for so many years and you should see it through. And I said, this is not working out for me, but the people really, really close to me got where I was coming from and why I was miserable in the job, and then you should not be doing it. If it's affecting you, if you don't want to go back to work the next day, we all joke about Monday blues and all of that, but it's mostly a joke. By Sunday afternoon, you should look forward to going back and doing something new. If you don't get that feeling, then you should not be in that profession. For a lot of my colleagues, it is that passion that drives them. Every time we enter a war zone, we have no training, we have no gear, we have nothing. We're basically just chasing something because we want to tell that story. How do you rationalize that? And if you lose that hunger and desire to chase a story, then you should not be doing that. So the people who really get me got what I was saying, and I did leave it, and I had second thoughts later, and I did not find success in my saree venture, because whatever I built, I said, oh, this is so nice, I'll keep it for myself, I'll sell the next one. So it didn't quite work out.
I can fully relate to that. There is a love affair with sarees that go all around. She's got one of the most enviable saree collections that I know at every event that I see. But Tell me about the dive back into journalism, reigniting that passion, and finding the joy in being a journalist again.
I was trying to sell what I was making to the people I knew. And they also happened to be people running news channels. And, and I said, why don't I help style your anchors? And they said, yeah, we can do that, but can you do a show for us? Everywhere I went, I got this. And a few months into my break, there was an election, incidentally, in Tamil Nadu. I remember pacing up and down my drawing room and feeling very left out, because on counting day, there is a certain energy and buzz in a newsroom which is unmatched. You know, people are throwing numbers, you're trying to track leaders, you're trying to see who's going up, who's going down, who's winning, who's losing. And I was feeling like something is missing from my life. And I realized that I did enjoy what I was doing. I just had to do it my own way. So then when I went back with a conscious decision that this is not what I will do. I again went back to a 9 o'clock show, but I said I will not have guests. I don't want a debate. I want to do stories the way I want to do stories. I found takers, and one thing led to the other, and I could finally do things exactly the way I wanted to. So it all fell into place quite beautifully.
Well, it's been a privilege watching you find your voice and place in news, and thank you for that. So you report quite often about what's going on in the world and put that in perspective as to how that's relevant to India, how it affects us as a country, how it affects the public. So for a lot of these youngsters out here, sometimes the question is, why should I even follow news that happens anywhere else in the world? How is that relevant to me? I'm studying in a school in Coimbatore. How does it matter what's happening in Europe? So why should students and everybody else follow the news when it comes to what's happening across the world?
It affects all of us. We are in an increasingly interconnected world. What happens halfway across the world is going to impact your life one way or the other, whether you realize it or not. Economically, they say when the US economy sneezes, the world catches a cold or some such. So you may not be interested in what the Federal Reserve is saying or doing, but it's going to impact you. COVID, the pandemic began in one city in China, and then it brought the entire world to a standstill. Supply chains were disrupted. There is a war going on in Ukraine that is impacting wheat prices, that is impacting fuel prices. It is all connected, and it impacts us in more ways than we realize. So that is one purpose that we hope to serve, that you should know what's happening. What is the world that you're living in? What are the ideas that are shaping this world? What are the conversations that are controlling the mind space of our peers elsewhere in the world? That is one. The second thing is we're also giving our perspective of what's happening globally. You know, we are a country of 1.4 billion people. We have a voice, we have an opinion, and we should express it so that the world knows in no uncertain terms that this is where we stand on decisions and issues.
And we're here at the SSVM Institution's Transforming India Conclave. Can I ask you, what are some lessons you think we can learn from the world to transform India, and vice versa? What are lessons from India that we ought to be exporting more loudly to the rest of the world?
We're doing it now more than we ever did. You know, the India story is a very interesting one. We are such an old civilization. We aced science, mathematics, dance, literature many centuries ago, and then we saw the colonization and the invasion of various forces. When we got independence in 1947, we did not have any of the hard power that the world talks about. We did not have a military that was very robust. Our economy was down in the dumps because of all the loot. But we had the values that made us India. So we got independence through ahimsa. We were a civilizational moral force. We helped other countries at that time that were also colonized. We became a spokesperson of sorts for those countries. And slowly we built up. And then after the China War, 1962, we started working on our space program, we started working on our nuclear program, we started building up our hard power. And now in the last 10, 15 years, we've seen a very interesting mix of both hard and soft power. So we are telling the world the virtues of yoga. We have Bollywood films that entertain and sometimes inspire people to dance, if nothing else. We are emerging as a leader of the global South. We are sharing our values with the rest of the world. Buddhism is a very big export from India. At the same time, we are one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Our army is among the biggest and a formidable army at that. So it's a good mix.
What are a few things that India can learn from other nations so we can transform ourselves? Because I believe in learning from everyone around you. Take the best of what everyone has to offer, make it your own.
Yeah.
So, what do you think India, the youngsters of India, can learn from around the world?
It depends on what you take from a society. You know, there's a lot of debate on language, on whether English should be. I would say that English is now an Indian language. More Indians speak English than the Brits do.
Definitely. I think we have more English speakers in India than anywhere else in the world.
And we've added our own words to it, and we've added our own expressions, and we've made it our own. And
We're
it's
happily
absolutely-
changing their dictionaries as well.
Yeah. One of the countries that always inspires me, although now it's politically tricky, is Israel. You know, it's a very small nation surrounded by not very friendly neighbors. And some 30 years back, their biggest export was oranges, maybe. But now they're a startup nation.
Yes.
They have this indomitable spirit to grow, to build, and to start from scratch again, no matter how many times it's been destroyed.
I mean, Wonder Woman is from there. They're doing a great job.
So yeah, so that's one thing. I think the Japanese still respect what is old. It's a completely different world you feel when you go to Japan. Sometimes when they have a project coming up and there's an old tree, they'll build it around the tree and not damage the tree and things like that. So there is a lot to learn and a lot more than we can teach. But for that to happen, I think we have to be proud of what we have first. We have to learn to accept who we are and take pride in our values. Not wait for an American to tell us how good haldi is.